Welcome to Talking All Things Business. I'm Faye Waterman, your host, and my guest today is Alison Rogers. Now, Alison has many years' experience in many businesses. At the moment, she is actually in real estate, and we will talk about that and what she does and how well she's doing with her real estate and the reasons why. But Alison, let's talk a little bit about you and who you are and where you've come from first up.
Sure.
So let's talk about what were your inspirations when you were growing up?
I think that probably my mum and my grandmothers.
Right.
I've come from a family with some strong women and women that have been successful in the pursuits that they've chosen. My great-grandmother was a property investor, I guess you would call her, in the late 1800s in Hobart. And she owned around 14 properties, which probably was fairly unheard of for a woman back in those days.
Very rare.
So I've grown up with stories of my great-grandmother and then my grandmother living in a home that my grandfather and great-grandfather had built. And it was quite a fascinating home because it was, double story and lots of rooms and things to explore. So
there was a lot of history there.
A huge amount of history.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you know a lot of that history, or is there still more
I
to find out?
I know parts of it.
Yeah.
I certainly know where my there's my little one floating around.
That's all right.
I do manage to do business with 4 children. So
absolutely.
This little one's not at school yet, so he hangs with me sometimes.
And that's what it's all about. I mean, we are mothers, we go to work, we do business, we do all those things, and we have children that we have to work with as well. So, Alison's going to share some of those things with us as well.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll want to be the star of the show now. So
that's okay.
So there definitely is some history in terms of where they came from, and what's happened to them as because they weren't originally, not all of them were originally from Hobart. I had a Scottish background.
Okay.
So it was interesting just growing up, and obviously my impression as a small child was different to when I was an adult as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting. You're going to sit
there.
Come
and sit over here.
Sit there.
The microphone's turned off.
Yes, that's right. So okay. So you had very strong women.
Yes.
As role models for you.
Yes.
And that's a very rare thing, isn't it? Really, it's usually men who are the role models, because the women used to sit back and not do things.
Yes.
But you have your grandparents and grandmothers and great-grandmothers changed that for you.
So certainly my grandmother took her future into her own hands and certainly had an interest in property and saw how that could actually create wealth for her. My mum was one of those people that didn't conform. So she went off to get a pilot's license and a gun license, and she wanted to be a maths teacher, which obviously back then was probably not very female, populated and, that sort of stuff. But also there were things that she was not able to do because the expectation was that she would stay at home and look after the children. And there were 4 of us here as well. So, Dad went to work and Mum was the one that gave up work and stayed home, which obviously was traditional. Mum and Dad did separate when I was quite young. I think I was about 3 or 4. So
because she wanted to pursue her careers and she felt stuck.
Yes. So I think that there was certainly an element of that. There was certainly an element of, having been controlled, I guess, to a certain degree, and that there were things that she wasn't able to do. So, okay, take that off in. Mummy and Faye are having a conversation. Okay. So it was you know, partly to do with that, and I guess obviously because of those things, perhaps that she felt a little bit suffocated that you know, maybe they grew apart.
Yes.
I don't remember a lot about it. I don't remember them ever fighting. It wasn't as if I've experienced, you know, parents that were always at war or, you know, it was just, you know, one day Dad was there and the next day he wasn't. And so there was life. I do remember life with Dad at the home, and then I also remember life after we moved on, and, you know, Saturday was his day, you know, where we got to go and be with Dad and go and do things with him. So, yeah. So,
okay. So you had those very strong women. When you were at school, did you have any teachers that were
so when I was definitely. So when I was at school, probably there were a couple of women teachers that so my kindergarten teacher was a woman. She was a widow, actually. Okay. So and that was quite interesting. And I knew at that age, I knew a little bit about you know, life as you know, a woman who was independent because her husband had passed on. So and yeah, certainly for my early primary years, there were a lot of women teachers. I remember Mrs. Watt. She's since passed on, but she was, I think, my prep teacher. And she lived along the road from me. So so I remembered her because obviously she was quite, again, a very strong woman. And then there was Mrs. North when I changed schools. I changed primary schools in grade 2. And I had Miss White and then Mrs. North. So again, one of them was a single lady. One of them was quite a strong, you know, very, Mrs. North had a lot of strong convictions about lifestyle and about looking after yourself. And, you know, I remember, you know, her giving us explanations around why we should put moisturiser on, you know, because our skin can dry out from, you know, the weather and things. So little things like that, you know, are strong in my mind as a result of my schooling. So, so yeah, so I think that, it was, certainly highly populated with strong women who, you know, had opinions and had beliefs, and were happy to share those and were open to share those. Yeah. But I've also had some very strong male mentors as well, and so certainly, it's interesting how things happen, and this is probably just Hobart, but Mum is just doing this. So you look it up yourself, darling. Yeah. So my current director at work, his brother was actually my grade 6 teacher, and he was the principal of the school. Wow. So that was interesting, and he was certainly influential. He was a great teacher. He's one of those teachers I look back fondly on and say, yep, he was one of my great teachers. So so it was it was definitely a schooling where people had influence on the way that I thought, and you know, the things that I knew were possible. So,
So after you left school, what did you do?
So I actually went into childcare to start with. I had a few little casual jobs when I was sort of schooling, and childcare was one of those. So I was lucky that I was employed by the local council to do the after-school program and the holiday program with kids. And kids are still a very strong focus for me. It's one of the things that I use my income for now in terms of supporting children. And so I've got a very strong belief there that we need to be proactive in how we shape our young people, because they are our future.
Definitely our future. And that hence is saying that you have the number of children you have, and how many is that?
Maybe. So I have 4 children. Yes. We didn't plan to have 4 children. I don't know, maybe my husband did, but
secretly.
But yeah, so I probably imagined myself with 2 children. And so when we started a family fairly soon after we set up house together, and we did have those 2 children very close together. So there's 19 months between my 2 eldest children. And number 2 was probably our full stop. Yes. We had said it was our full stop. But number 3 snuck up on us very surprisingly, and thank goodness he did.
Yes.
It was just such a blessing. He was just such a joy, and motherhood as an older parent was just bliss. I just loved it. It was extremely. My two older children were corporate babies, so they had a nanny, and whilst I geared my business around being able to have them close by, and when they were very young, I'd pop out every 4 hours and feed and, have cuddles. And there were times when my clients would see me with a baby asleep on the front of me and things like that. So they were very much a part of me, but it was a different sort of growing up.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because women who are working now and starting their own businesses, don't let your children stop you, because they can be involved. They can be around. You can manipulate the system and have that flexibility to be able to do the things that you want to do with them around. Hence, you're seeing a young child coming in and out of this conversation now. Yeah. And that is a part of what work is all about, what we as women do, because we're not just working in a business, but we're mums, and we nurture it. So that is a part of who we are. We spend time nurturing, and if we have to take our children, which I did everywhere I went, my children came with me, and so be it. Yeah. Now they're grown up and one has their own children. Yeah. So they were corporate babies. Then your third one came along. Yeah. That was a totally different thing.
Yeah, so it was nearly 10 years difference. So things had moved on. I was doing a different business. So
what type of business were you doing when you were?
So I actually had an introduction service, a dating agency.
Right, okay. What brought you into that?
Tell us. So it was just very interesting, actually. So I was a competitive sports person. So
in
weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting. Yes. So I'd been a sprinter, and I met my boyfriend at college, and he was involved in the athletics club that I was involved in, but he was also a champion weightlifter, and so he introduced me to the sport of weightlifting. And the first national women's championships in Australia came up, and they were being held in Launceston. So Launceston was able to host the first, because the first woman weightlifter came from Launceston. So so they won the hosting of that championship, and so I was just encouraged by my boyfriend at the time and his coach. Oh, you're doing all right in the gym. Why don't you just go in the competition? Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, and I came second. So in my very first weightlifting competition that I'd only been training for a few months. So
a gift. A gift.
And it was, because that has gone on to be an important part of my life, and I continued competitive weightlifting right up until 1999. Wow.
And that's hard work in itself, because there's a lot of self-discipline. You have to work out. Yeah. You would have had children.
No children. No.
So you'd have to work out and spend a lot of time in the gym. Yep. Think about what you're eating, and then cut down and all that stuff that they do when you're weightlifting. Yep. What was it like?
Yeah, so it was 6 days a week, and there were some double session days. I did spend some time at the Australian Institute of Sport, which was just completely devoted to training and recovery. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough, not only physically but mentally as well, because you are grappling with your own fears. Like with weightlifting, obviously you're putting an immense amount of weight, more than your body weight, over your head, and things can go wrong. And you have this. We have our beliefs, around what we set as our benchmark in terms of what we are able to do, and we do that across a lot of areas in our life. It could be our income, where we think, well, we know we can earn, 200,000, but anything over that, our beliefs then sort of, throw us
peter out.
Yeah, that's right. So it was the same for me with weightlifting. I had to say, okay, well, if I'm going to lift this 80 kilos over my head, You know, why should the technique be any different? And, you know, I've put all the training in, I'm strong enough, you know, so I should be able to do that. But, you know, you had to sort of, there was a lot of mental rehearsal and a lot of mental work to sort of make sure that you were in the right frame of mind to do that.
Did you actually, and I know that athletes actually visualise their competition before they do it.
Yes.
So you've competed before you've actually competed.
Correct.
So that you get that mental stability, I suppose you say, to get into that mind frame of this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it, I've gone through all the actions, now I'm going to physically do it.
Yeah.
And that is a really strong mind and a strong will of being able to focus.
That's right.
It's the focus, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So for me, having to do that, and it was, you know, quite a you know, a regime, and, you know, there was no going out partying like any normal 18, 19, 20-year-olds were doing. It was, for me, it was training and keeping my body in, you know, the best
shape.
That's right. So that was what led me to my first job, because I was actually well, my first business, I should say, because I was actually the development officer for the sport of weightlifting at the time.
Okay.
And I had just prior to that, I had done my fitness ed certificate. That's how we met. Yeah. And I was doing that while I was in my childcare job, which was my first job. And I had realised I was living and breathing weightlifting almost 24/7. So I was going out and I was teaching people to lift. I was talent identification to bring new athletes into the sport. Okay. I was going into corporations and even jails to teach people how to lift safely from an occupational health and safety perspective. So basically my whole day was taken up with looking after and training people. And then I would get to the gym and have to then look after myself. And so it was mentally blocking all of that out to then focus on me. And so I decided that while I was in the prime of, you know, my sport, that I probably should make sure I'm giving it my all and you know, not be in such a physical job and not be so responsible for athletes, you know, doing the same thing that I'm doing.
Take better care of you.
Correct.
And not have to be responsible for everybody else as well.
So it was just like, okay, we've only got a few more years that I have an opportunity to be, you know, great in the world. And so I thought I need a job that is going to be not physically, you know, taxing, not something that I could take home with me at night and be mentally sort of, you know, stewing over and all of that sort of stuff. And so I started applying for office jobs, and I applied for this job, and it was back in the old CES days, Commonwealth Employment Services. It's now called Centrelink, but CES days, where the jobs were posted up on a board on a piece of card, and you would go through the job board, and there's this piece of card saying junior required, office junior required, telephone skills essential, typing skills not necessary. And I went, well, that's me, because I can't type to save myself, and I love talking. I can talk until the cows come home. So I thought, I'll go and apply for this job. And I can still remember the look on the man's face when I approached the counter and said, I'd like to apply for this job, please.
But you didn't know what that job
really was. I didn't know. I just knew it was an office junior. It could have been in a law firm or an accounting firm or at a service station. I had no idea. Yeah. And there was this gulp and this look at me, and he just looked at me and said, now, Alison, if you don't want to continue through for an interview for this job, we will understand. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And he said, it's at an introduction agency. And I went, oh, I don't even know what an introduction agency is. I was like 19 or 20. Yeah. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I'll give it a go. So anyway, I arrived at the office in Elizabeth Street there, and it was you had to go in between two shops. There was a shop on the corner and a restaurant, and you had to go up this little small staircase to get up to the top. So to start with, I was walking up the stairs with a bit of trepidation, because it's like, well, I'm not quite sure what I'm walking into here. This guy seemed a little bit concerned about whether I should be applying for it. And anyway, there's this beautiful sun deck up top, and a sliding door, and I slid the door open, and all of a sudden, bing bong, and it was this alarm that had gone off to obviously announce to the staff that someone had arrived. and this lady dressed in a long black flouncy dress with this gorgeous smile, and she had a little scarf in her hair, looked a little bit, I guess you call it boho in today's fashion terms. Very pregnant.
Right.
Bounced down the hallway to greet me, and anyway, so I very soon discovered what an introduction service was. And it actually wasn't what the man behind the counter was assuming that it was, because I think he thought I was going to a brothel.
Yeah.
He thought that I was going into some sort of sexual, services business, when in actual fact it was just a relationship consultancy.
So an introduction to introducing couples.
It was called Soulmates, and it was about people forming long-term relationships. And so in essence, basically what my job was to meet people, to interview people, and quite extensively interview them, to get to know them, to get to know what makes them tick, what their values were, what their beliefs were, what their lifestyle was like, what they find attractive in a partner, and all of those things. So so it was to me a very worthwhile service, and I loved it. And while I was doing it, I was very passionate about people finding romance and finding love.
And you saw lots of that?
I saw lots of it. And I took the business over. So my boss decided that she wanted to move back to her interstate home, and so the business came up for sale. And I was in my early 20s. I think at the time that I took it over, I was just turned 23, I think.
Wow. How do people respond to you because you were so young and you were in this business, running this business and doing all that sort of thing?
I learned some very important business laws way, back at the very start, which was great. So, can you turn that down, please, darling? Good boy. I was all of a sudden the owner of the business and managing my manager. The person that had taught me everything that I knew about running an introduction service. So so that was very interesting, and it had its challenges, because at the age of 23, all of a sudden owning this business, which I paid a substantial amount of money for, and I was very grateful that the bank saw and believed in me and the business plan, and obviously indicated that the profit and loss were actually, the bank manager said to me, if you don't buy this business, I'm buying this business, because it was a really good business.
Right. Okay.
It was one of those services that you could charge quite a lot of money for, and the overheads themselves were really quite low. It was just your office and your employee, whoever you employ. And we didn't have a lot of employees. When I took over the business, I only took over the business and 2 employees. So my ego kicked in.
Right, okay.
As a young 23-year-old who all of a sudden has this business with this huge amounts of money coming in, and I failed to recognise the importance of elevating your staff to a position where they feel worthwhile, valued, important. I didn't, I was up on the pedestal. It was me, here I am, this 23-year-old, and so I was coming and going as I pleased. And I bought myself a brand new car, and, I was dining out, and, all of these sort of things. And so my manager very quickly became quite jealous, I guess, and unloved. And so she left. And that was, for me, that was a very rude awakening to the world of business and the world of staff. Yes. And so, I had to sort of start all over again. I did. I mean, luckily I knew what I was doing, but it meant that I could no longer go out for my lung lunches and do all of those things, because, I had not had a lot to do with business before then, and I hadn't really been mentored in terms of how to run a successful business. I was a technician. I knew how to do that. Yes. But I didn't know what it meant to create a sustainable business.
You learned quickly.
I learned, and I was so blessed that I learned very quickly. At age 23, to discover how to run a sustainable business, how to value your team members, how to elevate them to a position where they feel more important than even the owner of the business, and that would impact their service to the customers, and their well-being as a person and their reason for coming to work each day. You know, so I was so fortunate that I learnt that at a very young age, and that I was able to turn that business around very quickly, having lost my my most prominent and most important employee. Yeah.
And what an amazing thing to learn at such a young
Absolutely.
age. Because what you've actually managed to do is take that through every business that you've had in your life to bring you to where you are today.
Yeah.
And, you know, nurture the people that you work with, have a respect for them. And it's all about that know, like and trust.
Yes.
And building that and developing that so that you work well together as a team.
Absolutely.
And this is what business is all about.
Yeah.
We can start a business on our own. We can do a lot of things, but in the background, we need those people to do the things that we aren't strong at, to do those things that are constant all the time, so that you can go out and do the other stuff, which brings in the income. Yeah. So after you did that, for how long did you have that business for?
So just under 10 years.
10 years.
It would have clicked over 10 the year that I sold it. But so that was a good, and I moved the business to an area that enabled me to have more staff. So I took over 2 staff, and when I sold it, it had 3 offices around Tasmania and 11 staff.
Right.
And I had also, as I mentioned, I employed a nanny. So I had a creche down the hall in the same building, and I had a full-time nanny that was there to help me with the children while I was still doing what I was doing. So, yeah.
And that's pretty amazing. And you've just said there and proven that because you've got children, there's no excuse. You can still do what you're passionate about and what you love, and create that lifestyle for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it came down to choices, in as far as, you know, I didn't want to ever give up work while I was having a family, but I also recognised that I wanted to spend some time with my children. So I wasn't working as hard. So I would come into the office a little later. I wasn't going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning anymore. I probably spent the morning, you know, playing with the kids and getting the kids ready. And then I'd, you know, come in a little bit later, you know, around that 10 o'clock mark. And I wouldn't work until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. I would probably leave at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that I could get the kids home and get them settled. And certainly I recognised the value in having the kids close by.
Yes.
So for me, rather than putting them into a childcare centre, I actually employed that nanny. Thought I'm going to be spending the same amount of money in childcare fees a week as I would with the rent and the wages for a full-time nanny. But I had the joy of being able to wander down the hall and say hi and sit and play, and obviously being able to breastfeed, which was quite important to me, and, you know, all of those other things that I wanted to do as a mother as well.
And breastfeeding or whatever you do, I mean, some women can't do that, but, you know, if it's an important thing, it's the nurturing side again, isn't it? Yeah. So after you left that behind, do that business, what did you do?
I tried to be a full-time stay-at-home mum.
That didn't happen though, did it?
It lasted 6 months.
6 months.
6 months of, you know, like I had this dream of, I'll be that mum who bakes and potters in the garden, growing her own veggies and going to playgroup and walking the pram along the promenade and, you know, all of those sort of things. And it didn't work for you, did it? No. I love my children to bits and I loved doing that, but it wasn't what I wanted to do for most of the time. I just wanted to do that for some of the time. My brain was starved of adult stimulation and
and this is the strong women of your past coming through you and you knowing this is not what you want to do, even though you nurture your children and do all that sort of thing. You need that other stimulation outside of that. And I find that most women do. You know, they can stay at home for a period of time and then go back to work, but they're finding toward the end of that, maybe 12 months or whatever it is that they have off work, that it is time for them to go back to work and get that adult stimulation and get their brain working again. So what did you step into after that 6 months?
So I went back to my original training, which was as a strength and conditioning and fitness instructor, and I went and worked in a women's lifestyle centre.
Right.
So it was weight loss and health and fitness. So it was a new centre that was opening up in Hobart. I was really attracted to the philosophy that they had around health and fitness, and that it was a lifestyle, not just a diet or a spurt at training or whatever. And I loved the fact that it was focused on women, and that it was about education and support, and it had a relaxation component. So it was about teaching women to nurture themselves. So
Fill
again,
their cup up.
Yeah, that's right. So again, there were all of these things that I valued, things that I held as beliefs that were coming and speaking to me through that ad. And so I went for my interview and was hired on the spot, which was lovely. And so I did that, and that was a job. That was a part-time position. Because obviously I still had the two children, still were quite young. They were, maybe 2 and 3 or 4, that sort of age. And so, for me it was, okay, well, I'll get some stimulation. I'll get to fulfill, what I believe is my great
Your
work,
nurturing.
my purpose, and things that feed my soul.
Yes.
And the children, for me, I do believe that socialisation and getting used to being in other areas
Different
was a good thing for them nearing kindergarten and things like that. So in the end, that sort of.
How long were you there for?
Probably 2 years. I got headhunted for a business development role once word got out that I was back out working. So position was I was working full time in another job, and then realised that it was probably just a little bit too much with the kids. I mean, the kids were at school by then, so but in the end it was like, I think something's got to give, and so I sort of thought, okay, well, I need, now that the children are at school, and I need to start thinking about what my next career move is going to be.
Yes.
That whilst the health and fitness industry was a great one, and I loved it, and probably the best job that I've ever had in terms of my own fulfilment, it's not a sector that pays that well in general. I mean, obviously, if you're a Michelle Bridges or someone like that, and the evolving of the digital media and TV and all of that sort of stuff in that space now has helped that, but that wasn't then. That wasn't back then. So the wages were quite minimal.
Yes.
And so it was, and I was offered an opportunity to buy in, but I didn't see that was going to sustain.
You didn't have that feeling, did you?
Yeah. Well, I had the feeling, but I just didn't. If I was going to put in that amount of work, I didn't feel that it was going to provide me with my income goals. It may well have provided her with her income goals, but for me, I had a much bigger picture in mind for me. So for me, it was like, okay, I need to move on now and do that. So for me, I was very fortunate in as far as I have a great sales and marketing
you have those
ability.
Skills, yes. Yes, definitely.
And that was something that's come through, again, from my mother. My mother was, as a single mum, a stay-at-home mum, she got involved with multi-level marketing businesses. Yes. And the training through those companies is actually quite exceptional.
Quite amazing.
Quite exceptional.
Yeah.
So
if you take it on board fully and do it properly, it can be very.
So because she was doing that, I was also by default listening to the tapes that she was listening to, meeting the people that she was meeting. And so the personal development side of things from probably around the age of 16 was quite amazing. It was certainly something that created a great foundation for me to go on and do what I was doing. So for me, I was in that business development role, and then I was headhunted again for another business development role. So I probably did 2 years at each of those companies, and then came across an opportunity to have our own business again, and that was in marketing and advertising.
Yes.
So, and that came about through a client that I met while I was doing my other jobs. So initially we thought that would be a great residual income for us, that I would continue in my business development role, and that would just tick on nicely. It was one of those businesses where once you'd filled the space, once you'd sort of done the contract with the client, then it was just ticking over.
Yeah.
Basically, it was
It just happened.
Outdoor media, so bus and taxi advertising, billboards, you know, those sort of things. So it was something that, I didn't have to spend a lot of time on to have a really good income coming in. And I'm really fortunate that we did that, because then baby number 3 snuck up on us.
Yes.
So I was able to then leave my job, move that business to home, and run that business from home, whilst I had 2 little ones at school and another one at home. So that was great. And that was when I really enjoyed that older mum and an older mum being in business, because it gave me what I needed as a mother at that time, and that was to spend a lot of time with my baby. And so for me, the baby came with me wherever I went, and on the days where I had a client, my mum would meet me, and she would take the baby for a ride in the pram for half an hour, whatever time my meeting slot was, while I went and did business.
I love it.
And so that was how we sort of continued that for many years. And so, and then because we had enjoyed being older parents so much, and number 3 was such a blessing, we just thought, we could do that again.
So you had another one.
So Callan came along, and Callan didn't come along as soon as what we had hoped. I did have a miscarriage,
right?
And we had resigned to the fact that was it. That's my body telling me I'm too old and we've had enough. And so in actual fact, I was 3 months pregnant with Callan before I discovered that I was pregnant, because we'd given up on the hope. And so I had been quite unwell, and had been going through all sorts of tests to try and find out what was wrong with me.
And you were pregnant.
And I was pregnant. So it wasn't until the doctor said, well, we better start doing some x-rays and things. I thought, let's do a pregnancy test before we have x-rays.
Yes.
I know what's wrong with me. So and then with Callan again, he came to, my business had evolved. So I had moved away from selling the outdoor media. I didn't find it fulfilling. I didn't think it was the most effective way for small businesses to advertise. It's a lot of money to advertise. A billboard, a minimum of $1,000 a month, and that's a lot of money to do in below the line style advertising.
Yes. And looking at this
when you've got your TV, because if you're going to do outdoor space, you need to be in the newspaper or on TV or on radio as well. So it meant that really it was only feasible for the much larger corporations. And I much enjoyed looking after small business. I liked to help people in small business to thrive. So for me, I didn't want to sell space for the sake of selling space. I wanted to make sure that people were getting value and it was actually making a difference in their business. So I learned very quickly that my marketing consulting side of things was an area that was in more demand in that sector than the actual outdoor billboard advertising. So I had morphed that. I had started to introduce networking services. So relationship marketing was certainly one of my big pushes when I was, encouraging people to look at their marketing strategy.
Okay, and let's talk about that relationship marketing. What do you mean when you say relationship marketing?
Yeah. So for me, I firmly believe in the power of building relationships and having a network and working with people to help people to get what they want in life.
Yeah.
So for
it's
me,
that support, isn't it?
Correct. So for me, I was very much in the space of encouraging people to meet new people, make new connections in person.
Yes, face to face.
Correct. So because that we had moved away from that. We had moved away. Digital media was starting to sort of sneak in by then, and People were losing the art of having a conversation. People were losing the art of developing a relationship and learning about how they can serve and add value to another human being, because it was all about what's in it for me.
Yes.
So
yes.
We had moved right away from giving without any expectation of a return, because people were out for, what is the return for me? How do I get something from this?
Yeah.
And I don't believe that that's the right way to approach any sort of relationship, whether it be business or personal.
Yes.
I believe that we're there to help one another, and
Yes.
I believe it's about creating and collaborating and really showing how we can add value to people so that people can thrive.
Absolutely. And that takes us into the next step in your life and where you sit right now.
Yes.
And the conversation about how you got into this business.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So real estate had certainly been something that had bubbled up from time to time across all of my jobs and businesses. So when I mentioned about my current director's brother being one of my teachers, we had got to know that family quite well, and my mum ended up working as a receptionist for my current boss.
Oh, really?
In his first agency on the Eastern Shore. So she was working there casually, and so on Saturdays I would quite often go into the office with Mum. So I'd be sitting behind the desk, you know, doing my colouring in, writing and things like that. And I would see this man, and he's quite a tall, Hank Patrisma, my director, has quite a presence about him. He's tall, he's strapping, he's got a great energy. And he would come into the office and he would be really positive and uplifting, and he'd be ushering people through the office, and I didn't realise at the time what was going on, but he was going to sign contracts with people to buy houses. So he would wander in, he would be, you know, so vibrant, and go into office in closed doors, and you could, you know, hear mufflings of, you know, you could hear that there were people in the room but couldn't hear what was being said. And then they'd come out and everyone's got these massive smiles on their faces, and they're shaking hands and they're excited, and you know, then they'd leave, and I would think, wow, you know, I'd like to have that effect on people.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to do that.
Yeah.
So, but that got parked in my subconscious somewhere along the line, because I obviously went off and did childcare, and I was very interested in sports. So obviously the fitness leader qualification was something that was fairly natural to progress to. And it wasn't until I had my dating agency business where I had thoughts about, you know, real estate. Maybe real estate was the next step. But then by the time I had sold the dating agency, I already had children. So it was like, okay, well, not now. It's not practical now. So I'll park that when the kids are at full-time school, maybe high school, when they're old enough, I'll then go into real estate, because I had also been aware that real estate was going to be a long, you know,
long-term,
and that, you know, the hours aren't, you know, normal. You know, we're out at night and we're out on weekends, and we also, you know, work different, like spasmodic, because we've got to be there when people aren't at work, you know, because that's when they want to look at houses, and that's when they want to sign contracts.
Yes, that's right.
So I always knew that it was going to be nights and weekends, and that wasn't necessarily practical when my husband was working full-time in his own business, and I had a young family. So it had always been sort of parked. Till one day, about 2.5 years ago now, when my husband and I were looking for a self-managed super fund investment, and we had been contacting a number of agents and looked at a number of properties, and each time we had done that, we weren't very happy with the service. You know, like, agents wouldn't call us back, and if they did call us back, they were not very forthcoming with information. Sometimes the information was incorrect. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was one agent who didn't turn up to the meeting at all. So I'm sitting there waiting, tried their mobile phone number,
Didn't
no
turn
answer,
up at all.
left message, didn't turn up at all. And to this day, that agent has never contacted me.
Wow.
My husband, who has a different surname to me and has different email and all of that sort of stuff, also sent an email to that same agent, also left a message.
Didn't contact him?
No, he didn't contact him. And in the end, my husband had to physically call the receptionist at the office workplace and say, I need to speak with that agent. Could you please put me through? And then he explained to that agent that, you know, I've been trying to contact you for well over a week now because we're interested in purchasing this property. And his very words were, oh yeah, I don't chase buyers. That's not my style.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. This is pre-boom in Hobart. So buyers aren't as forthcoming as what they are right now. But yeah. And I just said to Patrick, you know, if I just applied half of what I apply in my current businesses, I would just rip this up. And he just said, why don't you? And I said, are you giving me permission? I said, you know, it's going to be long hours. You know, it's going to be nights. It's going to be weekends. Are you ready for that? And he said, just do it. You've been wanting to do it. Just go and do it. Because I agree with you. I agree that you will. Yeah. So yeah, it was like, yeah, I can finally go and do what I want to do. And so then I started interviewing local agencies to find out who I was going to work for. And obviously
you were interviewing them to find out who sat well with you.
Absolutely. And I've always done that.
How many people would do that?
Probably not many.
Or if any.
I remember I had already created a business plan for how I was going to roll out my real estate career. And I think they were quite gobsmacked when I rocked up to the interview with this business plan. It must never ever happened before. But so for me, I've always had that belief that I have to find partners, organisations that align with me, because if I let people in that
don't sit well,
correct, it will affect my character, it will affect my well-being. So for me, where possible, I select where I'm going to be and who I'm going to be doing that with, and I'm really fortunate that I'm in that position to be able to do that.
Well, you know, that is absolutely amazing, because I think more people need to do that so that they get value, or, you know, fulfill some of the values that they actually have. But you going and interviewing them, what was the response for the first few that you did?
So all of them wanted me to start with them immediately. So the people that I approached were people that I had had dealings with in the past, or had indicated that Alison, if you're ever interested in real estate, please give us a call. So basically what I did was I sat and I looked at what brands I felt aligned with my approach to customer service and how I like to do things. And then I also looked at, you know, the pros and cons for each of those brands. So I was very sure that I didn't want to be in that lower socioeconomic demographic, but I also didn't want to be in that upper elitist, upper echelon sort of demographic as well. So it needed to be a brand that had integrity. It needed to be a brand that had a non-judgmental approach, you know, like no one was beneath them, and you know,
no one was better, or
and no one made them
them
feel correct. And also a brand that stood as a professional, like, you know, on the face of it, it looked like it was a professional, well-run organisation. It wasn't tacky, and it wasn't too commercialised as well. So there were some people out there that were, you know, really grasping at straws with their marketing in terms of how they were trying to explain to people what their difference was in the marketplace.
And do you find that, you know, being in real estate and you know the different companies and organisations that are around, you find that they're not developing those relationships with their clients. They're just looking at what they can get out of it for themselves, instead of having that nurturing of both getting something out of it and really putting in for their client and giving them what they actually need. So you're fulfilling all this, aren't you? And we'll talk about an experience of you having a a sale on Christmas Day.
Yes. Yep.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that you will find is that some agents will put tools down at certain times of the year, and Christmas is a classic one.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take Christmas off, or that you shouldn't, not take time out to be with your family.
Yeah.
But you also need to be realistic around when are transactions likely to take place,
Yes.
and when should you be taking those times off. So for me, there's a lot of people out there that will put tools down just before Christmas, sort of around that 15th to 20th of December.
Yes, yes.
People start to wind down, and there's all the parties, and, people work less and leave early, and, all of those sort of things. And that will go all the way through in Tasmania, right the way through until about the second week of January.
Yes.
Because solicitors and things like that don't start coming back until the 5th or 6th of January,
Yes,
whatever that next working day is after all the public holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't actually Christmas Day, it was actually Boxing Day. So I actually got the call on Christmas Eve,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, look, I am actually going to have Christmas with my family, and I'm glad that I did, because that was a very important Christmas, because it was actually the last Christmas that I had my nephew with us. So, but I said, I will come out to you on Boxing Day. I said, I'm happy to do something on Boxing Day. So, and it was a great sale. It was a great contract, and it just showed that I was there to obviously help people when they were available, because they were from interstate.
Yes.
And they were only down for the Christmas period.
Yes. And
they wanted to look at a house, and they wanted to buy a house and have it all locked in, so that when they moved later in January, it was all sorted. So I was able to facilitate that for them. And many agents wouldn't have done that. Many of agents would have just said, "Look, call me back on the 5th of January," or whatever they wanted.
And they would have lost that relationship. And it's not about the sale, it's the relationship that they would have built with them.
Correct.
That would have gone.
Yeah. Well, it was showing my vendors that I was doing whatever it takes to get them the very best outcome.
Yeah.
And it was showing my buyer that I was there to help them and to facilitate, their process in a time that's convenient for them. And they understood, when I asked the question on Christmas Eve, when are you here until,
Mm-hmm.
and what are you doing? And, obviously they didn't have family here,
Mm-hmm.
because they were from interstate. So that was just the two of them on Christmas Day. And when I explained, what I was going to be doing on Christmas Day, but that Boxing Day was, an opportunity to do that, then, they were happy with that.
Yeah.
Had they have said to me, "We are only here on Christmas Day," then I probably would have said, "That's okay. Can I meet you, either before I went off to have my lunch with my family, or wait and say, look, I'm not going to be available until X amount of time," and then come out afterwards. So, but yeah, I do believe that we need to take time out, be with our family, and we need to be, when we have holidays, we need to shut down. But for me, I don't take holidays over that period of time, because I know that it can be a time when other people can't be
around.
That's right.
Available.
So for me, I take my holidays later in January. So yeah, and for me now, I've built a team, so it's really great, because
and this is only a very short space of time that you've built this team.
Yeah.
You've been in real estate just over 2 years.
That's right.
And in your area,
Yes.
you are top salesperson.
Correct. Yep.
And that's in 2 years. And that is over and above all the people that have actually been in real estate for 30 years, 12 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever.
Yep.
You've ranked them all and gone above them, because you step up and you take that initiative to do the things that they probably don't even understand.
Potentially.
Yes.
I'm quite often looked at strangely, we, in our sales meetings or in our trainings, when a question's been asked, and everybody's questions are asked, answered in a fairly similar way, and then when I get round and I go blah, 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 and then sometimes I'm a bit weird. I'm a bit weird, because my answer is usually completely different.
But what's weird about it? It actually sits well with you, and because you've had the experience that you've had through the different businesses, and you've developed those relationships, and people have headhunted you and done all those sorts of things, you've developed a sense of camaraderie. You've developed a sense of trust, and people know you, and when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And you don't let people down. And because I've experienced being let down in real estate, and I think, and it's a passion for me, but I've never stepped into the arena. But to see the way you value what you do and value your clients and your vendors and all those people is an admiration. And I think what you're but what you're actually doing is educating those people that are surrounding you to look at how you do things in a different perspective. And regardless of whether they take it on board or not, you're educating them to look at things in a different way. Which is special.
Well, I would hope that I'm inspiring people to, look at things at a much deeper level, I guess, to raise their level of awareness around people and, what it takes for people to live a fulfilled life. I'm very fortunate that whatever I've done in life, I've been able to attach what I believe is my purpose to it. So, and so it's whether I'm, introducing people for romantic relationships, selling telecommunications, or, whatever, billboards, or real estate, that I've been able to show people how to create something in their life that I believe is, quite special. So, it could be, a question around, what industry do you think you're in? And people go, oh, we're in the real estate industry, or we're in the marketing industry. And yes, you are. There's all of those basic things. But for me, I said, well, I'm in the romance industry. And they go, huh? And I said, I'm here to help people fall in love. And so it's like, So for me, I'm able to carry that. So for me, I do believe that one of my greatest strengths is the ability to create connection. And for people to come together and feel that they belong. And I love to, throughout my real estate career, I love to inspire people to really love the space that they live in. And when I say live in, I don't just mean the bricks and mortar that they live in. That is really important, because I do believe that our home will influence what we go and do outside of the home. And how we live will influence, how we perform and our health and all of those sort of things. But I also mean from a metaphorical perspective as well, in as far as that they really love the space within. And that they really love the space that they hold within their community. And within the world at large. So for me, I'm there to inspire people to live in their home the way that they really want to live in their home, and to actually really just really love, being alive and living in their space. And I like to encourage business encourage homeowners to keep their home in showroom condition, so that it gives them choices. Time and time again, I'm coming across people who go, oh, I'd love to buy that house, but my home's nowhere near ready. We've got to do this, 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 and this. And 9 times out of 10, it's quite large stuff. Like, we've got to paint, we've got to recarpet, we've got to, pull all the weeds out of the garden. I need to replace the guttering. And they're jobs that have been let go for years and years and years. But if only they had continued to clean the guttering and repaint it regularly and keep the leaves out of the gutter, and had only they had cleaned the carpet regularly, or put mats down in high traffic areas, or replaced that carpet when it got to the end of its lifestyle or lifetime, that then,
they wouldn't have all those things.
They're ready to go. Yes, the housework would need to be done, and yes, there'd be a little bit of decluttering, but it wouldn't be as stressful, and it wouldn't be as costly, and it wouldn't be as lengthy in time to actually get that all done, and they could miss an opportunity while they're going through
That's
that.
right. It's a bit like nurturing yourself, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a bit like the maintenance on your own self, your health and well-being. It's the same with your house. You have to nurture your house.
Yes.
It's the health and well-being of the property itself.
Yes.
And that is your gardening, it is your maintenance, your general cleaning and looking after things. So it's the
and
same
if you're
thing.
in business and you don't have time, delegate.
Yeah.
Hire a gardener, hire a cleaner. It is amazing how, you know, much of an impact it can have on you and your family when you come home and the house is clean and everything's been packed away.
Absolutely.
You know, because you can get on and enjoy your family, and you can, you know, not have to stress about the fact that you've got to do all of these other things when you're already tired because you've been working. You know, obviously there are so many business people out there that are working long hours or working, you know, very hard. So so I do encourage people to do that and showing them ways that they can actually do that, because most people will go, oh, well, that's not in the budget.
Yes.
But but if you live in your home the way you intended, the impact that will have on your life and your income is quite amazing.
Absolutely.
But you've got to do that for it to then, you know, so it's like a bit of a catch-22. But I like to be able to show people how they can do that, because at the end of the day, it's you know, we only have one life.
That's true.
and we best make the most of it now.
Yeah.
And I see so many people who get their house ready for sale and put it on the market, and then they go, oh, I don't know whether I want to sell now because I love this house now. So why did you wait until you were selling it? Why didn't you live in your home when it could actually impact your whole life?
Yeah.
And the time that you were here.
Yeah. And I don't usually ask to give some tips, but you've just done that.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you, Alison, for your wisdom that you have built over the years and your experiences and your expertise that you take into your workplace, but not only into your workplace, in everything that you do, into all the other things you do outside your workplace, and there are many of those things that we know about.
Yeah.
And you bring people together, you create communities, and you make things happen, or you bring them together and allow them to happen.
Yeah. They do it all themselves, but it's about providing that space where they feel safe and where they feel supported to do and create and collaborate and do what they want to do. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for providing the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. And this is Talking All Things Business. I'm Faye Waterman, your host. If you would like to be on the show, all you need to do is message me through Facebook and let me know, and we can have that conversation. It is bye for now, and we'll see you next time.